Keep the card. Prove you deserve it. Saturday night, Red Oak Diner in the heart of town was packed, yellow lights reflecting off the oak tables. Logan Pierce leaned back, tapping his fingers on the wooden table like he was waiting for a show, placed his black credit card down and smirked before walking away. Grace Miller looked at the bill, her hands trembling slightly. Her eyes landed on the last item, porterhouse steak, triple portion. Daniel Reed, the middle-aged man sitting in the corner, watched quietly. He knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a trap laid out in advance. Uncomfortable glances spread across the room, spoons hitting cups sounded like judgment being passed. Grace took a deep breath and did something that made the entire room go silent. But why would someone who has everything need to humiliate a young person just trying to make an honest living? If you believe respect isn't optional, drop a comment with where you're watching from. Saturday night arrived with the usual rhythm. 7:30 Main Street already buzzing with weekend traffic headlights cutting through the cool October air. Red Oak Diner sat at the corner like it had for 30 years, neon sign flickering red and white against the darkening sky. Inside, the place hummed with life. Families crowded into booths, workers still in their flannels, ordered coffee refills. A couple near the window studied the dessert menu like it mattered. The smell of grilled onions mixed with fresh brewed coffee, the kind of smell that made you feel like you belonged somewhere. Daniel Reed sat alone in the corner booth, the one that gave him a clear view of the entire floor. He'd chosen it deliberately. Old habits from coordinating retail floors died hard. Even now, months after stepping away, he still noticed things. The way servers moved between tables, the rhythm of the kitchen, who waited too long for water. Tonight, though, he wasn't here to audit anyone. He was here because he needed to remember what normal felt like. What it felt like to just sit, eat a decent meal, and not carry the weight of a dozen supply chain decisions on his shoulders. His sister had been the one to suggest it. "You've been holed up long enough, Daniel. Go sit somewhere public. Eat something that isn't microwaved." He'd listened. Ordered the meatloaf special. The server had been polite, efficient. Her name tag read Grace. She moved with a kind of focused calm, the kind you only got from doing a job long enough that your body knew the patterns before your brain did. Refill the water. Check the table. Smile, but don't linger. She wasn't flashy about it, just steady. Daniel liked that. Steadiness was rare. The entry bell chimed sharp like a gavel. Daniel glanced up. A man walked in, mid-40s, tailored blazer over dark jean shoes, polished enough to catch the overhead lights. He carried himself like someone who expected doors to open before he reached them. The hostess greeted him with a familiarity that suggested he was a regular, led him to a booth 2 rows from Daniel. The man sat, didn't bother looking at the menu. Just leaned back, stretched his arms across the booth's edge, and scanned the room like he owned the floorboards. Grace approached with her notepad. Daniel couldn't hear the conversation from where he sat, but he could read the body language. The man ordered without looking up. Grace nodded, scribbled, turned toward the kitchen. The man's gaze followed her. Not the way someone admires good service, the way someone sizes up a chess piece. Daniel went back to his meatloaf. Tried to, anyway. Something about the man's posture bothered him. The tapping fingers. The way he checked his watch twice in 3 minutes, like he was waiting for something specific to happen. Daniel had seen that look before. Back when he ran operations for a mid-sized retail chain, he'd worked with executives who treated employees like experiments. Performance reviews disguised as loyalty tests. Metrics that didn't measure productivity so much as obedience. He'd let it slide too many times. Told himself it wasn't his place to interfere. That was years ago. Different life. Grace returned with a plate. Porterhouse steak edges charred the way the menu promised, sides arranged with the kind of care that said the kitchen still gave a damn. She set it down, refilled the man's water glass without being asked, stepped back. Professional, respectful. The man cut into the steak, took a bite, chewed slowly. Then he looked up at her, smiled. Not the warm kind. The kind that came with terms and conditions. "This'll do," he said loud enough that the couple at the next table glanced over. "You've been efficient tonight, Grace. I appreciate that." He pulled out a black credit card, the kind with no spending limit, the kind that made cashiers pause. He placed it on the oak table between them, tapped it twice with his index finger. "I'm heading out for a smoke. When I get back, we'll settle up. But here's the thing." He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping just enough to sound conspiratorial. "I'm going to leave this here. and I want to see if you're worthy of handling it." Grace's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened slightly around the notepad. Daniel watched from the corner fork halfway to his mouth. "Worthy." Grace's voice was even. "Careful." The man nodded, leaning back again, fingers drumming on the table. "It's a little test I like to run. See who takes initiative, who understands opportunity. If you handle this right, the tip reflects it. If you don't—" He shrugged. "Well, effort matters, doesn't it?" He stood, adjusted his blazer, and walked toward the exit without waiting for a response. The black card stayed on the table, crooked against the wood grain, catching the yellow light like a tiny spotlight. The entry bell chimed again as he stepped outside. Grace stood there, staring at the card. Around her, the diner's noise seemed to dull. A fork clinked against a plate. Someone coughed. A baby fussed 2 booths over. But in that small radius around Grace, everything felt suspended. Daniel set his fork down. He'd seen enough workplace power plays to know what this was. It wasn't generosity. It wasn't mentorship. It was a game designed so only one person knew the rules. Grace glanced toward the door, then down at the card. Her hand moved to her apron pocket. She pulled out her phone, unlocked it quickly. For just a second, Daniel caught a glimpse of the screen. Banking app. The balance visible before she tilted it away and locked it again. Her jaw tightened. She looked at the bill still sitting on the table next to the card. Porterhouse steak triple portion. Sides. Drink. The total hovered somewhere north of $60. She stood there another beat. Then she did something Daniel didn't expect. She pulled out her own card, walked to the register near the counter, and swiped it through the reader. The machine beeped. Receipt printed. She folded it once, tucked it into her apron, and walked back to the table. The black card still sat there untouched. She picked up the bill, clipped it to her notepad, and turned toward the kitchen. The room exhaled. Conversations resumed. Forks moved again. But Daniel kept watching. He pulled a napkin from the dispenser, clicked his pen, and wrote down the time. 7:42. He didn't know why yet. Just knew he'd need it later. Outside, through the window, he could see the man leaning against the brick wall, cigarette glowing in the dark. He checked his phone. Smiled to himself. Like he'd already won something. Inside, Grace refilled a coffee pot, her face calm, movements precise. But Daniel noticed the way she kept her phone in her pocket, the way her hand brushed against it once, twice. Like she was making sure something was still there. Proof. Evidence. A line drawn. The door chime cut through the noise like a verdict. The man walked back in, still smiling. He slid into the booth, glanced at the black card still sitting on the oak table, then looked up at Grace as she approached. His smile widened. Predatory. Triumphant. "Did anyone ask for this?" he said, voice loud enough to carry. Grace met his gaze. Didn't blink. "That's why I did it." The man's smile faltered. Just for a second. Then it came back sharper. He picked up the black card, slipped it into his wallet, and stood. "Interesting choice. We'll see if it was the right one." He dropped a $5 bill on the table. Not enough for the meal. Barely enough for the coffee. "Monday night, 6:30. I'll be back. Let's call it round 2. He walked out. The bell chimed one more time. Sharp, like a gavel closing a case that hadn't been tried yet. Grace picked up the $5, folded it, put it in her apron. Her face gave nothing away. But her hands, when she cleared the table, moved a little faster than before. A little harder. Daniel watched her disappear into the kitchen, then looked down at his napkin. 7:42. He underlined it twice. Something was building here. He could feel it the way you feel weather changing. Pressure dropping. Sky darkening. Storm coming. He finished his meatloaf in silence, paid his bill, left a decent tip. 20%. The way it should be. As he walked toward the door, he glanced back one more time. Grace was wiping down a table, methodical, thorough. But her eyes flicked toward the oak booth where the black card had been. Just once. Just long enough. Daniel stepped outside. The October air bit at his neck. He pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward his car. Behind him, the diner glowed warm against the street. Inside, people kept eating. Kept talking. Kept pretending they hadn't just watched something ugly dressed up as opportunity. He sat in his car for a minute before starting the engine, staring at the napkin in his hand. 7:42. Monday night. 6:30. He didn't know Grace's full story yet. Didn't know what she was studying, what she was working toward, why she'd chosen to pay out of pocket instead of playing along. But he knew one thing. That man wasn't done. And next time it wouldn't be private. Daniel folded the napkin, tucked it into his shirt pocket, and drove home. The streetlights blurred past yellow halos in the dark. Somewhere behind him, the diner kept serving. Somewhere ahead, Monday was already waiting. Monday came in gray and cold. By 6:15, the sky had already given up on daylight, slipping into that early autumn dusk that made streetlights flicker on before most people finished dinner. Daniel stood outside Red Oak Diner, hands in his jacket pockets, breath visible in the air. He'd told himself he wasn't going to come back. Told himself it wasn't his business. That he'd done his time managing other people's problems, and now he got to walk away. But he'd spent Sunday thinking about that black card, about the way the man had smiled, about Grace's hands tightening around her notepad. And Monday morning he'd woken up knowing he'd be here, not to interfere, just to witness. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes seeing was the first step toward changing. He walked inside. Same sound as Saturday. Same diner. Different wait. He chose a booth near the counter this time, closer to the action. Ordered coffee, asked for the menu even though he already knew what he wanted. The server wasn't Grace. Younger kid, maybe 19, still learning the rhythm. Daniel didn't rush him. Just waited. At 6:28, Grace came through the kitchen doors, tying her apron. She moved with the same steady efficiency, checking tables, refilling water pitchers, nodding at regulars. If Saturday had rattled her, she didn't show it. But Daniel noticed the way she glanced toward the door every few minutes, the way her hand brushed her apron pocket like checking for something. A receipt, a reminder, proof. 6:32. The bell chimed again. Logan Pierce walked into same blazer, same polished shoes, the same expression that said he expected applause just for showing up. The hostess greeted him, but he waved her off, headed straight for the booth he'd occupied Saturday. Sat down, leaned back, started tapping his fingers on the oak table. Grace approached, notepad ready, face neutral. "Evening," she said. "Professional, nothing more." Logan smiled up at her. "Grace, good to see you again. I was hoping you'd be working tonight." He opened the menu, scanned it without really reading. "Let's make this interesting. I'll take the ribeye, medium rare. But here's the thing. I want it with the garlic butter from the salmon special. And instead of the standard sides, I want the roasted vegetables from the chicken plate and the mashed potatoes from the meatloaf. Can you handle that?" Grace wrote it down. Didn't hesitate. "I'll check with the kitchen. Oh, I'm sure they can manage." Logan closed the menu, handed it to her. "But let's say halfway through I change my mind about the potatoes. I might want fries instead. You'll need to catch that before it's plated. Think you can stay sharp?" Grace met his eyes. "I'll make sure it's right." "Good." Logan's smile widened. "Because tonight's tip depends on execution. No mistakes, no second chances. You prove you can handle complexity, and we'll talk compensation." He said it loud enough that the couple at the next table looked over. An older man in a flannel shirt frowned into his soup. Daniel watched from his booth, coffee halfway to his lips. This wasn't a dinner order. It was a performance. Logan wasn't testing Grace's ability to serve. He was testing her willingness to jump. Grace walked toward the kitchen. Her posture didn't change. But Daniel noticed the way she paused at the counter, pulled out her phone, typed something quick, then put it away. He couldn't see the screen, but he could guess. Documentation. Timestamp. Evidence. 20 minutes later, the ribeye came out. Plated exactly as ordered. Garlic butter, roasted vegetables, mashed potatoes. Grace set it down, checked the table. "Anything else right now?" Logan cut into the steak. Took a bite. Chewed slowly, eyes on her the whole time. "Actually, yeah. I changed my mind. Fries instead of the potatoes." Grace didn't blink. "I'll get those for you." "See, that's the problem." Logan set his fork down. "I mentioned that earlier. You should have anticipated it. That's what separates good service from great service. Anticipation." The couple at the next table stopped eating. The man in flannel turned slightly in his seat, watching now. Daniel's hand tightened around his coffee mug. Grace's voice stayed level. "I'll have the fries out in 5 minutes." "Sure, but the moment's gone, isn't it?" Logan leaned back, fingers drumming again. "I mean, I'm still going to eat. But you missed the mark. That affects the outcome. He picked up his phone, tapped something into it, then glanced up at her. If this hotel deal stalls, I'll run another loyalty check. People need to prove they're worth the investment. Grace turned and walked toward the kitchen. No response. No reaction. Just movement. Daniel watched her disappear through the swinging doors, then looked back at Logan. The man was smiling to himself, scrolling through his phone like he'd just closed a successful negotiation. Daniel pulled a napkin from the dispenser, clicked his pen, started writing. Monday, 6:32. Ribeye order, complexity test, changed requirement mid-meal. He drew a line underneath, then added loyalty check. He circled it. This wasn't about food. It wasn't even about service. This was about control, about making someone prove their value over and over until the terms became impossible. Grace returned with the fries, set them down, cleared the untouched mashed potatoes without comment. Logan ate in silence for a few minutes, then flagged her over again. So here's what I'm thinking, he said, voice casual like they were old friends. Friday night, 8 o'clock. I'm bringing some associates. We're going to have a full dinner. And I'm going to use that opportunity to demonstrate what real service looks like. You'll be working, right? Grace hesitated, just a fraction of a second. I'm scheduled. Perfect. Logan wiped his mouth with a napkin, folded it, set it on the plate. Because I think it's time we settle accounts. Show everyone what it means to pass the test. He stood, reached into his wallet, and pulled out a single penny, placed it on the table next to the empty plate. You blinked at the end. That's not passing. He walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. Friday, in front of everyone. Let's see if you've learned anything. Grace stood at the table staring at the penny. Around her, the diner had gone quiet. The couple at the next table exchanged glances. The man in flannel shook his head. A woman near the window whispered something to her husband. Everyone had seen it. Everyone knew what it meant. Grace picked up the penny, slipped it into her apron, cleared the table. Her hands moved with the same precision as before, but Daniel noticed the slight tremor when she stacked the plates. Not fear. Anger. The kind that stays controlled because letting it loose would cost too much. She walked past Daniel's booth on her way to the kitchen. He caught her eye for just a second. Wanted to say something, wanted to tell her she didn't have to show up Friday, that no job was worth this. But he didn't, because he knew what she'd say. That rent didn't pay itself. That EMT courses weren't free. That walking away felt good in theory and impossible in practice. Instead, he pulled out his phone, scrolled through his contacts, found the name he needed. Aaron Blake. Community labor lawyer. Someone he'd worked with years ago during a wrongful termination case at one of his retail locations. He typed a message, need to talk, possible wage theft situation, evidence in progress. The reply came 30 seconds later. When Daniel glanced toward the kitchen where Grace had disappeared. Soon. He paid his bill, left a solid tip, 25%. On his way out, he stopped at the counter, caught the manager's attention. Hey, quick question. Do you keep security footage? The manager, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, nodded. Standard policy. Why? Just curious. If someone needed a copy for, say, a labor dispute, how would they request it? She studied him for a moment. Maintenance request form. Has to go through the owner, but we keep everything for 90 days. Good to know. Daniel smiled. Thanks. He walked outside. The October air felt sharper now, colder. Behind him, the diner hummed with the sound of forks and low conversation. Ahead, Friday waited. 3 days. Enough time to build a case. Enough time to make sure this didn't end with another penny on another table. Daniel pulled out the napkin he'd written on, looked at the timeline. Saturday, Monday, Friday. A pattern. Escalation. Logan wasn't going to stop. He was going to push until something broke. Until Grace quit or cried or snapped in front of a crowd and gave him exactly the story he wanted to tell. Not this time. Daniel folded the napkin, tucked it into his pocket next to Saturday's, and headed for his car. He had work to do, calls to make, evidence to organize, because witnessing wasn't enough anymore. Sometimes you had to build the case. Sometimes you had to stand up before the gavel fell. Inside the diner, Grace wiped down another table. The penny sat in her apron, small and sharp and cold. A reminder, a warning, a line drawn in copper. Friday was coming, and this time the whole room would be watching. The week moved slow and fast at the same time. Tuesday, Daniel spent 3 hours on the phone with Erin Blake, walking her through what he'd seen. She listened without interrupting, asked clarifying questions, took notes he could hear clicking through the line. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You're sure about the timeline?" she finally asked. "Positive. I wrote it down both nights. Time, location, exact behavior." "Good. Keep doing that. We need chain of custody. If this escalates, we need to show pattern and intent." She paused. "You said he mentioned a hotel deal." "Yeah, something about running a loyalty check if it stalled." "Interesting. I'll look into his business background, see if there's history." Wednesday, Daniel filed a maintenance request form at the diner. Polite, professional. Claimed he'd lost a jacket Saturday night, wanted to check the footage to see where he'd left it. The manager said she'd pass it along. No guarantees. But the request was logged. That was enough. Thursday, he met Erin at a coffee shop downtown. She brought a folder, slid it across the table. Inside printouts. Business filings. A settlement notice from 3 years ago. Logan Pierce, owner of a chain of upscale lounges, had been sued by former employees for forced tipping policies. The case settled out of court. Terms confidential, but the docket summary mentioned coercive workplace testing and dignity violations. "He's done this before," Erin said, tapping the paper. "And he'll do it again unless someone stops him." Daniel stared at the document. "Friday night, he's planning something public. Then we need to be ready. You'll be there." "Yeah." "Good. Record if you can. I'll be on standby." She closed the folder. "And Daniel, make sure Grace knows she doesn't have to play along. She has rights." "I'll try." But trying meant catching Grace during a shift, and Grace had been working doubles all week. Daniel had stopped by the diner Wednesday night, but she'd been slammed, moving between tables like water, finding cracks. He'd left without saying anything. Some conversations needed space. Friday would have to be enough. Friday arrived cold and clear. By 6, the temperature had dropped into the 40s, the kind of dry cold that made your breath hang in the air. Daniel arrived at Red Oak Diner at 6:15 earlier than he needed to. He wanted the same booth as Monday, the one with the clear view. But when he walked in, it was already taken. Older couples celebrating something. Anniversary, maybe. Balloons tied to the chair. He took the next best option. Counter seat. Less subtle, but closer. He ordered coffee, opened a newspaper he had no intention of reading, and waited. The diner filled quickly. Friday night always brought a crowd. Pickup trucks parked out front, workers coming off late shifts. A few families' kids still in soccer uniforms. A group of younger people near the back laughing loud, phones out. The noise level rose. Comfortable. Familiar. The kind of noise that meant people felt safe here. Grace moved through it all with her usual precision. She'd pulled her hair back, tied her apron tight, kept her face neutral. But Daniel noticed the way she checked her phone between orders, the way her gaze flicked toward the door every few minutes. She was waiting. Bracing. At 7:58, Logan Pierce walked in. But this time, he wasn't alone. 2 men followed him. Mid-30s business casual, the kind of guys who looked like they closed deals over steak dinners and measured success in quarterly projections. Logan led them to the largest booth, the one near the center of the room. Maximum visibility. Grace approached, notepad ready. Logan smiled up at her. Big. Performative. Grace, perfect timing. "Gentlemen, this is the server I was telling you about." Very diligent, very eager to prove herself. The 2 men nodded. Polite, but disinterested. They were here for dinner, not drama. Logan opened the menu. "We're going to make this a working dinner. I want you to bring everything out family style. Start with appetizers, then the mains. Coordinate timing so it all arrives together. Think you can handle that?" Grace wrote it down. "What would you like to order?" "Surprise us. Show initiative. Prove you know what good service looks like." He leaned back, fingers drumming on the oak table. "And Grace, this is your final exam. Everything we've been building toward. Don't disappoint." The 2 men exchanged glances. One of them frowned slightly. "Logan, we're just here to eat." "Exactly. And you're about to see what excellence looks like." Logan's voice rose just enough to carry. A few nearby tables glanced over. "This is how you train people. You set expectations, you test, you reward results." Grace stood there, pen hovering over the notepad. Around her, the diner's noise dipped. Forks slowed. Conversations paused. People were listening now. "I'll put in the order," she said quietly. "You'll do more than that." Logan's smile sharpened. "You'll demonstrate what it means to earn your place." Grace turned and walked toward the kitchen. Her posture stayed straight, but Daniel saw the tension in her shoulders, the tightness in her jaw. She wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to snap, but she wasn't okay either. Daniel pulled out his phone, texted Aaron. "He's here, it's starting." The reply came immediately, "Recording." He switched his phone to voice memo, hit record, slipped it into his shirt pocket mic facing out. Not perfect, but enough. 20 minutes later, Grace returned with appetizers. Wings, loaded fries, mozzarella sticks. She arranged them on the table, set down plates, napkins. Logan inspected each item like he was grading an art project. "Temperature's good. Presentation could be better." He picked up a wing, took a bite. "But you got it out on time. That counts for something." One of the men cleared his throat. "Logan, this is a little much." "Nonsense. This is mentorship." Logan wiped his hands on a napkin. "You have to push people to see what they're made of." "Grace understands that. Don't you?" Grace didn't answer. Just refilled water glasses and walked away. The mains came out 30 minutes later. Steaks, salmon, chicken, all timed perfectly, all plated well. Grace set them down without commentary, stepped back. Logan took a bite of his steak, chewed, swallowed, looked up at her. "It's fine, but fine isn't excellence." He pushed the plate forward slightly. "And that's the lesson here. Effort isn't enough. You have to exceed." The diner had gone almost silent now. Even the kids had stopped talking. Every eye in the place was on Logan's table, on Grace, standing there, hands at her sides, face carefully blank. Daniel couldn't take it anymore. He stood, walked over, stopped at the edge of the booth. "Excuse me," he said. Voice calm, steady. "I couldn't help but overhear." Logan looked up, annoyed. "Can I help you? Maybe I can help you." Daniel pulled the napkin from his pocket, the one with the timeline, set it on the table. "See, I've been here the last 3 times you've come in, and I've noticed a pattern." Logan's smile tightened. "I'm not sure what you're talking about." "You're not testing skill," Daniel said. He pointed to the labor regulation poster on the wall behind the counter. "Minimum wage, tip laws, worker rights. You're testing dignity. There's a difference." The booth went quiet. One of Logan's associates leaned back, arms crossed. The other stared at his plate. Logan's voice had an edge now. Someone who used to manage people. Someone who learned the hard way that power doesn't make you right. Daniel looked at Grace. "And someone who thinks she's already proved enough." Logan stood. They were the same height, same build. But Logan carried himself like he expected Daniel to back down. "This is none of your business." "It became my business when you made it public." Daniel gestured around the room. "You wanted an audience. You got one." A man in work boots at a nearby table stood up, turned his chair to face them. "He's right. I've been watching this whole thing. It's not okay." A woman near the window pulled out her phone, started recording. Logan's face flushed. "This is a private matter between me and my server." "She's not your server," Daniel said quietly. "She works for the diner, and even if she didn't, tips aren't chains. Respect isn't something you grant after someone jumps through hoops." The room held its breath. Logan stared at Daniel. Daniel stared back. Grace stood between them, frozen. Then Logan did something Daniel didn't expect. He smiled, reached into his pocket, pulled out another black credit card, flicked it onto the table like tossing bait. "You want to make this interesting? Let's demonstrate what a final test really looks like." He snapped his fingers at the manager who'd emerged from the kitchen. "Make sure they all hear this." Daniel felt his phone vibrate. Aaron's message, "Time." The diner door opened slightly. Someone stepped out. Daniel didn't turn to see who, but he heard the murmur, saw phones tilting, felt the shift. No one was laughing anymore. Logan looked around the room, saw the faces, the cameras, the silence that wasn't approval. It was judgment. And for the first time all night, his smile faltered. Logan Pierce stood at the center of the diner, black credit card gleaming on the oak table like a challenge no one had asked for. The murmur that had started when the door opened grew louder, spreading through the room like ripples. People weren't just watching anymore. They were leaning in, turning chairs. A woman with gray hair 2 booths over put her fork down and crossed her arms. A younger guy near the counter pulled out his phone camera already aimed. Daniel didn't move. Just stood at the edge of Logan's booth, napkin still on the table, timeline visible. Saturday, Monday, Friday. Escalation in ink. Logan's 2 associates had gone quiet. One of them checked his watch. The other stared at his steak like it might offer an escape route. Out. Neither looked at Logan. That said enough. You know what the problem is? Logan's voice. Daniel's voice cut through. Calm, steady, colder than before. Let me tell you what I see. I see someone who's shown up on time every shift. Who's handled your deliberately complicated orders without complaint. Who paid for your dinner out of her own pocket rather than play your game. That's not lack of worth. That's integrity. One of Logan's associates looked up, frowning. You didn't mention that. Logan waved him off. It was a test of initiative. It was exploitation. Daniel pulled out his phone, opened the voice memo app, held it up. And I've got 3 nights of recordings that prove it. The room went completely silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to stop. Logan stared at the phone. You've been recording me. Public space. Legal in Oregon. 1-party consent. Daniel didn't smile. Just stated facts. Every time you've made her jump through hoops. Every time you've dangled tips like bait. Every time you've called it mentorship when it was really just control. The manager stepped forward from the kitchen doorway. She looked at Logan, then at Daniel, then at Grace. Is this true? Grace hesitated, then nodded. The manager's jaw tightened. She turned to Logan. Mr. Pierce, I think it's time for you to settle your bill and leave. You can't be serious. Logan's voice cracked slightly, anger mixing with disbelief. I'm absolutely serious. The manager crossed her arms. This is a family establishment. What you're describing isn't how we do business. Logan looked around the room, saw the phones recording, saw the faces hard and set, saw his associates gathering their things clearly done with the evening. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. This is absurd. I'm a regular customer. I've spent thousands here. And you've used that to torment my staff. The manager's voice stayed level, professional. But there was steel underneath. That ends tonight. Daniel felt his phone buzz, glanced at the screen. Aaron, on my way. 10 minutes. He looked at Grace. She was still standing by the counter, notepad clutched tight. Her face showed exhaustion, relief, fear. A dozen emotions cycling too fast to name. He wanted to tell her it was over, that she didn't have to stay. But he knew the reality. Walking out felt good. Paying rent felt necessary. Those 2 things didn't always align. Logan grabbed the black card from the table, slapped down cash instead. More than enough to cover the meal. No tip. He looked at Daniel. You have no idea what you've just done. I know exactly what I've done. Daniel met his gaze. I've called out someone who uses power to hurt people, and I'd do it again. Logan's associates were already at the door. One of them turned back. Logan, we're leaving, with or without you. Logan stood there another beat. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. Fast, shoulders tight, the door swung shut behind him. For a moment, the diner stayed frozen. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first. The man in work boots. Then the woman with gray hair joined in. Then more. Within seconds, half the room was applauding. Not for a show, for something real. Grace looked up, startled. Tears welled, but didn't fall. She blinked them back, nodded once at the room, and disappeared into the kitchen. Daniel sat back down at the counter. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline catching up. The manager walked over, poured him a fresh cup of coffee. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me, thank her. She's the one who stood there and took it. Still. The manager glanced toward the kitchen. I should have stopped it sooner. You stopped it when it mattered. The diner slowly returned to its rhythm. Forks scraped plates. Conversations resumed. But there was a different energy now. Lighter. Like something heavy had been lifted and carried out with Logan. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Erin, pulling in now. He stepped outside. The October air hit sharp and cold. Erin was climbing out of her car folder under one arm. "Did I miss it?" she asked. "You missed the confrontation, but we've got everything we need." Daniel handed her his phone. "Voice memos. 3 nights, plus about a dozen witnesses who just recorded the whole thing." Erin scrolled through, nodding. "Good. This is good." She looked toward the diner. "How's Grace? Make sure she knows her options." Erin tucked the phone into her jacket. "And I'll start compiling this for the labor board. If he's done this at other locations, we might have a pattern case." Daniel nodded, felt the exhaustion settle into his bones. "I need to sit down." "Go. I've got this." Erin smiled, tired but determined. "You did good, Daniel." He walked back inside. Grace was back on the floor now, refilling water glasses. She caught his eye, mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." He nodded, sat back at the counter, finished his coffee. Around him, the diner hummed. Normal. Safe. The way it should have been all along. Have you ever seen a test like this at work? Tell us what you did or what you wish you'd done. Saturday morning came quiet and gray. Daniel woke early, the kind of early that comes after a night of restless sleep, where your brain won't stop replaying scenes. He made coffee, sat at his kitchen table, and stared at the 3 napkins spread in front of him. Saturday, Monday, Friday. The timeline looked cleaner in daylight, more factual, less raw. His phone buzzed. Erin. "Got time to meet? Found something you need to see." An hour later, they sat in the same coffee shop as Thursday. This time, Erin brought a laptop instead of a folder. She opened it, turned the screen toward Daniel. A private forum. Workers' rights community. The kind of place people posted when they couldn't afford lawyers but needed somewhere to vent. "I've been monitoring these." Erin closed the laptop. "But here's the thing. Settlements don't erase behavior. They just postpone accountability." Daniel thought about Friday night, about Logan's face when the room turned against him, about the way he'd tried to frame cruelty as mentorship. He really believes he's helping people, or he's convinced himself that's what he believes. Erin sipped her coffee. Either way, it's a pattern, and patterns are prosecutable. "What's the next step?" "I file with the labor board. Document everything. Your recordings, the forum post, the settlement history. Build a case that shows systemic abuse." She paused. "But I need Grace's cooperation. She's the primary witness." "She'll do it." "You sure? Because testifying means reliving this. It means depositions, possible court appearances, her name attached to a public case." Daniel wasn't sure, but he nodded anyway. "I'll talk to her." Sunday afternoon, he went back to the diner. Grace was working the early shift, the slower hours between lunch and dinner. He sat at the counter, ordered pie he didn't want, waited for a break in her routine. When she came over to refill his coffee, he spoke quietly. "Can we talk off the clock?" She glanced toward the manager, who nodded. "Break room, 5 minutes." The break room was small. Lockers, a table, a microwave that looked older than Daniel. Grace sat across from him, hands wrapped around a water bottle. "How are you holding up?" he asked. She shrugged. "I'm here. That's not the same as being okay." "No, but it's what I can manage right now." She looked at him. Tired eyes. Careful posture. "Why did you do it? Step in like that?" Daniel hesitated. Truth was complicated. Messy. "Because I used to be the guy who didn't." Grace frowned. "What do you mean?" Grace was quiet for a moment. "You stepped in this time. Doesn't undo the past, but maybe it changes the pattern." He leaned forward. "Erin wants to build a case. Against Logan. For the labor board. She needs your testimony." Grace looked down at the water bottle, turned it slowly in her hands. "What does that mean? Practically, it means documented statements, possibly depositions. If it goes further, maybe court, your name on record. And if I say no, then you say no. No one's forcing you." She was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I paid for that steak because I didn't want to owe him anything. I didn't want him to have leverage. But it didn't matter, did it? He just made up new rules. That's what people like him do. They move the goalpost, make you prove something that was never in question." Grace looked up. "What was I supposed to prove? That I'm human? That I deserve basic respect? You were never supposed to prove anything. That's the point." Daniel pulled out the napkins, laid them on the table. "This is a pattern. Saturday, Monday, Friday. Escalation. And you're not the first person he's done this to. Erin found a lawsuit, multiple employees, 3 years ago." Grace stared at the timeline. "He got away with it. He settled, which means he paid people to stay quiet. But settling isn't justice. It's just expensive silence. She traced her finger along the dates. Saturday, Monday, Friday. If I testify, it won't be quiet. No, it won't. People will know my name. They'll Google me. They'll have opinions about whether I should have just quit, whether I'm overreacting, whether I'm doing this for money. Probably. And none of that will change what happened. No. But it might stop it from happening to someone else. Grace closed her eyes, took a breath. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Resignation, maybe. Or resolve. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Tell Aaron I'll do it. Daniel nodded. Okay. But I want the evidence documented properly. Chain of custody, timestamps, everything admissible. She'll make sure. Grace stood. Break was over. She tucked the water bottle under her arm, paused at the door. Daniel. Yeah. Thank you for stepping in when you didn't have to. He wanted to say something meaningful, something that would make the weight lighter, but all he managed was, you would have done the same. She smiled. Sad but genuine. Maybe. Guess we'll never know. She walked back onto the floor. Daniel sat alone in the break room staring at the napkins. Evidence. Proof. A pattern made visible. His phone buzzed. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, good. Because I just got an email. Anonymous sender. Leaked internal memo from Pierce Lounge Group. You need to see this. Daniel's stomach tightened. Forward it. The email came through 30 seconds later. Subject line, Entertainment Protocol. Body text, short and clinical. Character tests to be conducted during peak hours for maximum observational value. Document employee responses for training materials. Successful compliance rewarded. Resistance noted. Entertainment. Like humiliation was a spectator sport. Daniel forwarded it to his own files. Saved the napkins in a plastic sleeve. Called Aaron back. This is enough, right? He asked. To prove intent. It's a start. Combined with your recordings, Grace's testimony, the forum posts, and the settlement history, yeah, we've got a case. Daniel looked at his reflection in the break room window. Middle-aged. Tired. Trying to fix something he should have fixed years ago. Good, he said. Let's finish this. Outside the diner hummed. Inside, the coffee ring stain on the receipt Daniel had saved from Saturday sat pressed between the pages of a notebook. Proof. Evidence. A mark left behind. Sometimes justice was quiet. Sometimes it was loud. Sometimes it was just a series of small choices that added up to standing when it mattered. Daniel tucked the notebook under his arm and walked back into the noise. Sunday night arrived with a kind of inevitability. Daniel had spent the afternoon helping Aaron organize files, recordings synced to timestamps, forum screenshots printed and indexed, the leaked email authenticated through metadata. Everything labeled cataloged ready. The case wasn't just strong, it was airtight. At 6:45, Daniel walked into Red Oak Diner for what he hoped would be the last time he'd need to document anything. The place was moderately full. Families finishing early dinners. A few regulars at the counter. The manager was restocking napkins, moving with the efficient calm of someone who'd been through enough that very little surprised her anymore. Daniel took his usual counter seat, ordered coffee, waited. At 6:58, Erin arrived. She carried a briefcase, this time the kind lawyers bring to depositions. Professional, serious. She sat next to Daniel, ordered water, set the briefcase on the counter. Grace, she asked quietly. Working. Daniel nodded toward the back where Grace was clearing a table. She knows you're here. Good. We'll keep this clean. Present the facts. Let the evidence speak. At 7:05, Logan Pierce walked in. Alone this time. No associates, no entourage. Just him, same blazer, same polished shoes, same expression that expected the room to adjust to his presence. The diner didn't go quiet. Didn't stop. People glanced up, registered him, went back to eating. No fanfare, no audience. Just a man walking into a restaurant. He chose a booth near the middle, sat down, waited. Grace approached, notepad ready, face neutral. Evening, she said. Logan looked up, smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Grace, still here I see. Still working. Good, because I wanted to apologize for Friday. Things got heated, emotions ran high, but I think we can move past that, don't you? Grace didn't respond. just stood there, pen poised. Logan leaned back. In fact, I'd like to make it right. Demonstrate what real mentorship looks like. So here's what I'm thinking. I'll order, you'll serve, and at the end we'll settle up properly. Fair compensation for good work. Sound reasonable? Daniel watched from the counter, felt the familiar tightness in his chest. Logan was trying to rewrite the script, turn confrontation into reconciliation, make himself the reasonable one. Not tonight. Daniel stood, walked over, stopped at the edge of the booth. Actually, we've got something else in mind. Logan looked up, annoyance flickering across his face. You again? Me again? Daniel gestured toward Aaron. And someone I'd like you to meet. Aaron Blake, community labor lawyer. Aaron stood, walked over, set her briefcase on the booth table. Opened it, pulled out a folder. Mr. Pierce, I've been reviewing your interactions with Grace Miller over the past 2 weeks, along with some additional background on your business practices. Logan's smile froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me clarify. Aaron opened the folder. Logan stared at the papers. Where did you get this? Doesn't matter. What matters is what it proves. You've been using your position to humiliate service workers, repeatedly, systematically, and calling it mentorship. The diner had gone quiet now. Not dramatic, just attentive, people listening. Grace stepped forward, reached into her apron, pulled out a folded receipt, set it on the table next to Aaron's documents. This is the receipt from Saturday night, she said, her voice steady, clear. I paid for your meal at 8:10 p.m., not because I wanted to, because I didn't want to spend the next week wondering if you'd hold it over me. I wanted it settled. She pulled out another receipt. Smaller, different header. And this is from the EMT Scholarship Fund. I donated that same amount, 8:50 p.m., same night, because if I was going to pay, I wanted it to mean something. Not for you, for people who actually deserve support. She placed both receipts side by side. You called it a test of worthiness, but the only person being tested was you, and you failed. Logan opened his mouth, closed it. His hands gripped the edge of the table. This is absurd, he finally managed. You're twisting everything. I was trying to help. Help? Daniel's voice cut through. You made her jump through hoops. You changed the rules every time she met them. You turned her job into a performance for your entertainment. That's not... It's exactly what you did. Aaron tapped the email. Your own words. Entertainment protocol. You documented it. Logan looked around the room. Saw the faces. The phones. The same judgment that had turned against him Friday. But this time it wasn't just emotion. It was evidence. Undeniable. A man in overalls stood up from a booth near the back. His voice carried rough and certain. He pulled that on my niece, too, 2 years ago. At the lounge downtown. She quit after 3 weeks. We stayed quiet because she needed the reference. A woman near the window spoke up. My son worked for him. Same tests. Same games. He thought he was the problem. Another voice. Then another. Witnesses emerging. Stories aligning. Logan stood abruptly. This is a setup. No. Aaron's voice stayed calm, professional. This is accountability. And here's what happens next. I'm filing a complaint with the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries. I'm forwarding this evidence to the Restaurant Association. And I'm recommending that every person you've subjected to this treatment consider legal action. You can't. I already have. She closed the briefcase. And Mr. Pierce, if you ever approach Ms. Miller again or any other service worker with these tests, I will personally ensure it becomes a criminal harassment case. Logan stared at her, at Daniel, at Grace. His face cycled through anger, disbelief, fear. He grabbed his coat, fumbled for his wallet, threw cash on the table. More than enough. Too much, probably. Guilt money. He walked toward the door. Fast, shoulders hunched. No one said anything, just watched him leave. The door swung shut. Silence held for another beat. Then the man in overalls started clapping, slow, steady. The woman near the window joined in. Then more. Within seconds, half the room was applauding again. But this time it wasn't just relief. It was solidarity. Grace stood at the booth receipt still in her hand. She looked at them. 2 pieces of paper, proof that dignity couldn't be bought, only claimed. The manager walked over. Grace, take the rest of the night off. Paid. Grace nodded, tucked the receipts back into her apron, looked at Daniel and Aaron. Thank you. You did the hard part, Aaron said. We just made sure people listened. Grace smiled. Small, but real. Then she walked to the back, untied her apron, and left through the kitchen exit. Daniel sat back down at the counter, felt the exhaustion settle deep, but underneath it something lighter, cleaner. Erin packed up her briefcase. "I'll start filing tomorrow. This is going to take time. Bureaucracy moves slow. But it moves. Eventually," she paused. "You did good work here, Daniel." "So did you." "Team effort." She smiled. Tired, but satisfied. "Coffee sometime this week, debrief properly." "Yeah, I'd like that." She left. The diner slowly returned to normal. Forks scraped plates. Conversations resumed. The manager turned off the small speaker by the register that they'd used to amplify Erin's presentation. Daniel finished his coffee, stared at the counter where the receipts had been. 2 pieces of paper. Evidence. Proof. Justice measured in timestamps and transaction records. Outside, the October night had turned cold. Inside, warmth and noise and people eating dinner like nothing had happened, because for them, nothing had. Just another Sunday. Just another meal. But for Grace, something had shifted. A line drawn. A boundary held. Daniel paid his bill. Left a good tip. 30%. Walked toward the door. He looked back once. The diner glowed warm against the street. Safe. Fair. The way it should be. He walked to his car. Started the engine. Drove home through streets lined with yellow lights and dark trees. Tomorrow, Erin would file. The bureaucracy would grind forward. Logan would face consequences, or he wouldn't. The system was imperfect, slow, often unjust. But tonight, one person had stood up, and a room full of strangers had stood with her. Sometimes that was enough. 3 weeks later, Daniel sat in the same coffee shop where he'd met Erin half a dozen times. This time, he wasn't waiting for evidence. He was waiting for closure. Erin arrived at 2 briefcase in hand, but lighter somehow, less burdened. She ordered tea, sat across from him, pulled out a single folder. "It's done," she said. "All of it." The labor board accepted the complaint. They're opening a formal investigation into Pierce Lounge Group, looking at tipping policies, workplace conditions, employee treatment. She opened the folder, and the Restaurant Association sent a letter. Not a ban, but a strong recommendation that member establishments review their service standards and refuse to tolerate coercive behavior. Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Will he face real consequences? Financially, probably. Reputationally, definitely. His lounge chain's already seeing boycott pressure. Social media picked up the story. People are angry. She paused. As for criminal charges, that's harder. What he did was abusive, but threading the legal needle between harassment and business practice is complicated. So he might get away with it. He won't get away with it. He'll just get a consequence that's different than prison. Erin closed the folder. Sometimes justice is a fine. Sometimes it's public shame. Sometimes it's a bunch of servers across the city knowing his face and refusing to tolerate his tests. Daniel nodded. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined. But it was real. Messy. Human. "How's Grace?" he asked. "Good. She's back to full shifts. Manager promoted her to shift lead. Better pay, better hours. And she's finishing her EMT certification in January. She deserved it. She always did. Now other people just acknowledge it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Erin reached into her bag, pulled out a small frame, handed it to Daniel. Inside was the coffee-stained receipt from Saturday night, the one Grace had paid with. Below it, a handwritten note in Grace's writing, "This dignity was prepaid." Daniel stared at it. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because Grace wanted you to have it. Said you'd understand what it meant." He did. It meant boundaries. It meant knowing your worth before someone else tried to assign it. It meant paying up front so no one could claim you owed them later. He set the frame on the table, traced the edge with his finger. "What about Logan? Has he tried to contact anyone?" "Not directly, but his lawyers sent a letter. Boilerplate stuff. Denying wrongdoing, claiming misunderstanding, offering a settlement to Grace if she'd sign an NDA. She didn't. Hell no. She told them to put their offer somewhere anatomically improbable." Erin grinned. "I've never been prouder of a client." Daniel laughed. First time in weeks. It felt good. Outside the coffee shop, the November afternoon was bright and cold. Leaves skittered across the parking lot. People walked past bundled in jackets, breath visible in the air. "You think he learned anything?" Daniel asked. "Logan?" Erin considered. "Probably not. People like that rarely do. But everyone watching him learned something, and that spreads. Ripples. Exactly." They finished their drinks, packed up. Erin had another meeting. Daniel had nowhere particular to be. They walked out together, paused on the sidewalk. Thank you, Daniel said, for taking this seriously. Thank you for documenting it. Most people see something wrong and walk away. You built a case. I owed someone that, from a long time ago. Aaron nodded, didn't ask, just squeezed his shoulder once and headed to her car. Daniel stood on the sidewalk holding the framed receipt. Thought about the young woman who'd quit his retail chain years ago. The eviction he'd learned about too late. The pattern he could have stopped and didn't. He couldn't fix that, couldn't rewind time, but he'd stopped it from happening again. To Grace, to whoever came. If you've ever stood up for someone without a title, tell us how. Stories like yours matter.